one of the most popular writers in the US and worldwide, #1 New York Times best-selling author, and the woman that managed to outsell the Bible in 2022, the one and only Colleen Hoover.
I write because I have to.
You see, Colleen, a lot of people will actually disagree.
Action Man? Who the hell is that? Oh my god, no, it's John Wick.
The thing is, Colleen Hoover, once the queen of BookTok, the woman that had the whole internet in a chokehold for a while, seems to have fallen from her pedestal. The sheer amount of YouTube videos and TikToks made on a daily hate reading her books raises some questions as to why all of a sudden everybody seems to hate Colleen Hoover, and why is it so trendy nowadays to criticize and absolutely trash her books. I wanted to discuss this today with you, the Colleen Hoover phenomenon, if you will. So who is she, how she came to such colossal success and won the hearts of so many readers worldwide, and to what extent the criticism she gets is actually valid. Is it just a trend to hate on her, which too shall pass, or are there actually concerning things to be aware of when it comes to Colleen Hoover and her writing? We shall find that out today. So let's begin our journey into Colleen Hoover universe. First, a little bit of a background information on Colleen Hoover. Colleen Hoover is a 43-year-old American author, a happy wife and mom, living with her husband and her 3 sons in Texas. Colleen actually grew up on a dairy farm in Texas, and she was a social worker before she went on and started writing her books. And it all began in 2011 when Colleen started writing as a hobby, although she claims that she wanted to be a writer and to tell her stories from the early childhood.
When did you know you wanted to write?
Since I can remember, since before I knew how to write or read.
So in 2012, Colleen self-published her first book, Slammed, and in multiple interviews she said that she wrote it just for fun, and then basically she put it on Amazon releases so that her grandma, of all people, could download and read it. Well, considering that the entire plot of Slammed is a romance between a high school student and a teacher, side-eye, I wonder if her grandma was an avid fan of Pretty Little Liars or something. Anyways, so 4 months later, in May of 2012, Slammed hit the New York Times bestseller list as a self-published novel. And that was that. Colleen Hoover has had an unprecedented success ever since, going from self-publishing her books on the side to selling millions of copies of her books, being the New York Times best-selling author and Goodreads Choice Award nominee and winner for multiple years, and to just overall being this massive name in the bookish community that you simply cannot escape from. And Hoover mainly writes contemporary romance, but she has also written a paranormal romance and a psychological thriller. Colleen has also said that E.L. James, so the author of 50 Shades of Grey, is and has been her mentor for a long time. I mean, that already explains a lot, doesn't it? So the words BookTok and Colleen Hoover are practically inseparable at this point, and although Colleen almost always presents herself as being, surprised and shocked by her own virality, she's always like, I don't know how I got so lucky. I'm just a regular mom and a wife.
I don't know. I really don't know.
She actually has been a savvy self-promoter ever since 2012, when she was distributing free copies of Slammed to influential and popular at the time book bloggers. And overall, she was quite big both on BookTube and Bookstagram, way before TikTok came along. But of course, the level of fame that she has now largely stems from BookTok, where her novel It Ends With Us made rounds in 2020. And mind you, Ends With Us wasn't even new at the time. It was first published in 2016. And essentially, that's how Colleen Hoover became the queen of BookTok. She gained a cult following, the fans that call themselves CoHorts or CoHos, and for a while they are CoHos. I like this one better, so let's just stick with it. They were filming themselves sobbing and screaming and crying and gasping while pressing her books to their hearts.
Bitch only got 30 pages left of this book, and this is how Colleen got me feeling. What?
Colleen is also at least partly responsible for, revolutionizing the book business, for turning TikTok specifically into this best-selling machine. And now every bookstore from Barnes & Noble to independent little bookstore somewhere in the remote town of Europe has this BookTok corner where you can find viral TikTok books, and Colleen Hoover books are definitely the first ones that are getting placed there. So yeah, love her or hate her, her story of a mom and a social worker turned into a viral author, this huge name in the publishing industry, is at the very least fascinating and worth exploring. Now the question stands, how and why did she become so loved by readers all over the world? Well, Colleen herself claims that it was a combination of great timing, luck, and a word of mouth. And while this might be true, I wanted to highlight some other possible reasons she had the whole bookish community wrapped around her finger until recently. You see, I think the secret to Hoover's success is that her books truly are crowd pleasers. I've seen someone saying that they are the everything bagels of popular fiction, and that I feel really hit the nail on the head, because her books indeed have everything that makes people excited to read. Love stories, smut on top of smut on top of smut, tear-inducing scenes, wild plot twists, and most importantly, say it with me, trauma. And the latter is important because people generally don't tend to enjoy happy things. I mean, how often do you hear about a book focused simply on the happiness and joys of living? I for sure never heard of one. So there is this notion that trauma automatically makes a person interesting or deep, and it attracts us in real life, and it attracts us in books and media. Apparently, Colleen cracked this formula, and she continues to use it time and time again in her books. Then her writing is really simple. I cannot emphasize that enough, because sometimes it's truly impossible to find sentences longer than 5 words in some of her books. And while for some avid readers it may seem as a con, so something to criticize her for others it's actually really nice to understand easily and to be able to follow the story. Like for example, for a dyslexic reader or for a reader for whom English is their second language, these books are like super accessible and easy. And no matter how smart we consider ourselves to be, our brains actually tend to enjoy easy things. And while she might be a terrible writer in the eyes of some, there is no denying that she's a great plot/pace writer. Like, you're reading a Colleen Hoover book and you understand that it is objectively bad, but you still cannot put it down most of the time. And like this person on Reddit said, complaining about Colleen Hoover's books being bad is like complaining about McDonald's nutrition content. And sometimes that's just what you want. Something unhealthy, yes, but at the same time, the thing that is really quick and that will give you this instant short-term satisfaction. Also, if you're a slow reader, you can still finish her books in 1, max 2 days. And in times when reading has become quite competitive, a lot of people turn to this kind of books to just, up their book numbers on Goodreads, for example. And her books can also be great palate cleansers after a thick and loaded story that you've just read, when you just need your brain to relax for a while and unwind completely. I also particularly enjoyed this person's take on Reddit. So Bad Bitch Funky Witch wrote, I've made this comparison in the sub before, but CoHo is the Lay's potato chips of writers. It hits a certain spot, but you're also aware that the bag is at least half air, and you'll sure as hell need a bigger meal later. Twitter. I mean, no further comments. And we cannot not address a similarity of her books to a tropey fanfiction. A lot of people say that CoHo books are for people who didn't read fanfiction in their early teens and they are now making up for it. And honestly, Gen Z's Colleen Hoover phase will probably be an equivalent of what millennials call their Wattpad phase. And just like in a fanfiction, Colleen Hoover's writing is easy, relatable, and not at all deep. The story takes the center stage while the prose kind of stays on the background and it turns like basically completely invisible. And the tropes themselves, of course, like the hot guy saves you from your toxic boyfriend, or the hot guy from your past magically reappears in your life, etc., etc. And finally, we can hate on Colleen Hoover as much as we want, but what we can't do is deny that she single-handedly led a lot of female younger generation back into reading. And I personally have seen hundreds of people claim that one of her books was the first book that made them discover their love for reading or has gotten them back into reading. And her books work because they are such a stark contrast to the dense writing and complex topics of the books that people have to read for college or for school, and the writing that she or similar authors used really help people ease back into reading. So I would say it's not all that bad if those books help to deconstruct negative views on reading developed mostly through poor schooling experience, and if they show you that reading can be enjoyable and that you as well can be a reader. So we can and we will criticize Colleen Hoover, but what we shouldn't do is make fun of people for reading her book. Quite the opposite, we as a society should be happy to see people reading to begin with. Okay, and for a while that was it, right? Readers were obsessing over Colleen Hoover and all was fine and dandy. But why is it that people all of a sudden turned on her and now there is so much criticism and so much content being made around, let's be honest, trashing her books? Well, I for one think that there has always been a strong criticism aimed at Colleen Hoover and writers like her. I'll speak for myself, I rated quite a few of her books 1 to 2 stars way before there was this trend of hating Colleen Hoover. And I'm positive that I was not the only one. People were criticizing her for years and years at this point. It's just with that level of success and fame, of course, comes a lot of attention. And because Colleen is so huge, her books are all over TikTok and in the forefront of every physical bookstore. It now attracted readers who initially weren't even interested in reading her books at all, and some readers who have never even heard of her before. But we all want to see what the hype is about, right? And well, when those experienced readers, so those who have been reading for a long time, started reading CoHo books, of course their reactions were the way that they were. Like, I am not surprised in the least. And the thing is, hatred and negativity in general generate views. And people just love to watch this type of content, whether it is hatred directed towards celebrities, influencers, books, makeup releases, you name it. And this leads to one content creator seeing how many views others get and wanting those kind of views for themselves. And now people who have zero connections to BookTube are uploading their 2-hour-long vlogs reading and reacting to 5 most popular Colleen Hoover books. And 2, those who watch those videos, so the viewers themselves, they are getting exposed to actually valid points that people make in those videos, and they realize that there is actually stuff to criticize Colleen Hoover for, which we'll also discuss in a bit as well. And as for those who used to like her but now do not, I think that's just a simple case of people growing up and their taste evolving. While, as we discussed, CoHo might be a great introduction for non-readers, I think that upon experiencing much stronger books, they decide that she's no longer favorite because now they actually have something to compare her books to. Funny enough, I think that seeing the visual from It Ends With Us movie set really helped people to realize kind of the essence of CoHo books. Not the cute aesthetics, edits people make romanticizing those characters, but what these stories and characters would have actually looked like if they were to exist in real life. Like, everyone was bashing the actors that were chosen to play Lily and Ryle, and the outfit choices, the hair and whatnot. And it's funny how some people were like, well, what were you expecting, guys? This is a chick named Lily Blossom Bloom who opened a steampunk flower shop or something like this. She also writes to Ellen DeGeneres on a daily. And this is a guy, you know, a certified abuser and a surgeon on the side, constantly walks in scrubs outside the hospital. So maybe the stills that we got are not that far from the truth, you know. So now let's finally discuss the criticism that Colleen and her books received, as well as the controversies that she got involved in during these years. And I'm also going to try to voice my opinions on those, if I have any. And just to quickly mention here, although Colleen herself claims that she has a demographic of readers ranging between 15 and 80, mostly women.
I feel like my readers kind of range between, 15 and 80. I just got an email from a 74-year-old lady.
And some random prisoners here and there.
I got a message from a prisoner last week. They have my books in their prison library. I thought that was interesting.
It's fair to say that the vast majority of her readers are actually teenage girls, which kind of exacerbates everything that we're gonna talk about even further. And the main criticism of CoHo that I'm sure you've already heard about is that her books truly romanticize really toxic relationships. And I've had the pleasure, no I did not. I've read 4 of her books. So It Ends With Us, Verity, Ugly Love, and Reminders of Him. And although I've never read November 9, I'm unfortunately very much familiar with its entire plot. Honestly, everything I've learned about this book has been against my will. And I think it's fair to say that these are Colleen Hoover's 5 most popular books as of today, so I feel free to form my judgment and opinion of her as an author based on these 5 books. And I'll be honest, I do very much agree with this piece of criticism directed towards her. I mean, Miles for sure treats Tate as shit in Ugly Love, and this behavior for sure is romanticized and presented to us as this angsty romance. Don't even get me started on November 9, where the guy burns down the FMC's house, which leads to her face and body being severely disfigured. Then he stalks her for years without ever revealing what he committed in the past. He fetishizes her scars and burns, but in the end FMC finds everything about that, but she ends up with him anyways. Like, and fun fact of the day, which is not really that fun, November 9 actually used to have essay scene in it, but it was so bad and Colleen got such a strong backlash that they had to remove it. So if you were to buy that book today, thank God you wouldn't at least find that in there. Then there is a criticism pointed at Colleen Hoover's characters that the only distinguishing traits they possess are their traumas. Past and present abuse, burn scars, death of a child, a conviction for manslaughter of a former lover, and those are just to name a few. And trauma helps her make this emotional impact to get this reaction out of her readers, and the kind of reaction that leads to people screaming and sobbing and crying all over TikTok while hugging her books to their chests. And many think that Colleen simply does not have the capacity to achieve this kind of reaction by her writing, so that's why she kind of adds the trauma in the mix as well. And a lot of people have raised red flags about It Ends With Us specifically, saying that it romanticizes and glorifies abuse. And when when it comes to It Ends With Us, I personally did not feel like Colleen Hoover as an author romanticized abuse in this book. Quite contrary, I felt like it was quite clear where Colleen stands in regards to domestic violence and abuse. Like if you read the book and especially the author's note at the end, you know that this book is quite personal to Colleen, that she based this one on the relationships between her father and mother and the abuse that her mother had to go through and how she came out the other side of it. And while the way that Lily dealt with the situation wasn't like 100% ideal, like I wouldn't share a custody over my child with a person who pushed me down the stairs and tried to essay me. Well, I wouldn't ever want to have a child from that person in the first place. Even still, I felt like the handling of this particular issue, so the domestic abuse, was done somewhat well by Colleen Hoover, especially compared to her other books. If anything, I feel like It Ends With Us truly has a strong fan base, a cult following if you will, that truly romanticize this book to a somewhat unhealthy degree. There is this whole aesthetic around this book. You can find hundreds of clips like this ones all over TikTok. And you can see people debating over who is Tim Ryle or who is Tim Atlas, which if you've read the book, you know how ridiculous that sounds. So yeah, I might be in the minority here, but I do not actually think that Colleen Hoover has done this romanticization with It Ends With Us herself, but she has definitely profited off of it. And the most striking example of this was this coloring book scandal. So the coloring book was being made based on It Ends With Us, and people got confused there for a second as to what exactly there was to color, like the blood, the bruises, the wood on the stairs that Lily got pushed from. Anyways, Colleen got a ton of backlash for this one, and she quickly realized that using a story about domestic violence as a cash grab was not her most brilliant idea ever, and she apologized on Instagram saying the following: "Coloring book was developed with Lily's strength in mind, but I can absolutely see how this was tone deaf. I hear you guys and I agree with you. No excuses, no finger pointing. I have contacted the publisher to let them know I would prefer we do not move forward with it. Thank you for the respectful discourse and accountability. Nothing but love." And that was that. Another huge piece of criticism is incorrect marketing of her books, and this is pretty straightforward. Her books are literally being sold as a romance genre books, but they clearly contain a lot more than just that. And again, I personally do agree with this point. Her books are definitely mislabeled. I, for one, was going into It Ends With Us thinking that it's gonna be this cute romance, and reading about domestic violence all of a sudden really did affect me quite a bit. And I bet it would have affected someone who actually went through similar stuff even more. And I do see the point that people often make, that such books can actually be cathartic to some, and they for sure can. But that is only when you actually know what you're getting into and you actively choose to do it. So you deliberately choose to read this kind of books. And it's a completely different story when based on the marketing and the presentation of the book. You think that you're reading this cute little romance, when in reality you're gonna probably encounter some heavy and quite triggering stuff inside. And in defense of Colleen Hoover, some argue that her success started with self-publishing, where things like genre and marketability are much more flexible, and it explains why her work is so hard to classify now that it is represented by bigger publishers. But I personally believe that it is time that Colleen and her publisher figured this one out. Next, the lack of diversity in her books are on the whole another level. I mean, let's be honest, she's a white woman writing about white women's shit, and must be funny to hear this from another white person, right? What her books do have is a doormat female lead who will probably end up pregnant by the end of the book, a male lead with a weird name who is a walking red flag and a definition of a toxic masculinity, and not a single queer or person of color in the vicinity. Well, to be fair, It Ends With Us did have a gay side character, but first of all, he was like there for maybe a second, and secondly, he was so stereotypical that he may as well never been there at all. Now I'm gonna briefly touch on essay allegation scandal that Colleen Hoover got tangled in. Basically, if you don't know, allegedly her son essayed a 16-year-old, and when she reached out to Colleen for help, Colleen Hoover blocked her. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but I did not actually find an extensive information or quote-unquote proof about this whole situation, and I'm not particularly sure how I feel about this whole ordeal. Like, yes, we should believe all victims, but at the same time, how does she or how do we know that it's something real and not just somebody trying to start something with her just because who she is? And from what I've seen, people's opinion on this differs. Some say that she should have at least responded with empathy and kindness and directed the girl to the right resources/contacts. Others say that she's not responsible for the actions of her grown son, and she also does not owe it to anyone to provide comfort, validation, help, or resources. I don't know, let me know what you think. Well, and in the end, an honorable mention to the fact that it's because of Colleen Hoover that readers no longer have Z Library to download and enjoy free books. In a nutshell, Z Library was this popular piracy website, and a lot of Z Library's demographic was actually students pirating their textbooks, and it got taken down because Colleen Hoover fan posted a viral video about It Starts With Us, so a highly anticipated sequel to It Ends With Us being available on the platform, and everyone went to download it and the word got out, and rest in peace Z Library. Funny enough, I actually found out about the existence of Z Library because of this whole drama. And what can I say? Sometimes it's truly good to gatekeep, folks. Now, while preparing for this video, I watched, I think, every possible interview that Colleen Hoover has ever given, because that's the amount of free time I have on my hands. And from what I've seen, Colleen seems like very down-to-earth and a calm person. I don't know if that's just a facade that she puts on or her real personality. And so far, she has not been defensive towards criticism aimed at her. At the very least, I think that she knows how to not make the situation even worse when she's getting a backlash. That being said, in her interviews, she claims that her only goal is to entertain her readers and not to teach them anything.
You know, I always say I write to entertain, not to educate or inform or anything. Like I get entertainment out of my writing, and that's my only goal with readers. I want them to feel entertained.
And that's perfectly fine. Not every book is there to educate or enlighten us. However, it is important to understand your audience, and if it is mainly teenage girls and young adults, which it is, there is no denying this at this point, to try to write with their age and vulnerability in mind. Like, I don't think that it's teenagers' responsibility to carefully research what they are gonna be consuming. And again, we should not direct this hate and backlash towards them. Back when I was a teenager, I would have defended Twilight with my life. A guy stalking you while you're sleeping, it's so romantic, what you're talking about. But coming back to my point, I think it's author's job to write responsibly and to be as transparent as you can, and to make sure that your books are marketed properly, so that at the very least parents can help their children make decisions on what they should or should not be reading. Yeah, those are my final thoughts, and given the amount of criticism that Colleen keeps getting and getting, I'm just curious of what she writes next, and if she takes into account the things that people keep bringing up in regards to her writing. I must say that her most recent book, The Reminders of Him, was already quite a bit better compared to everything else that I've read from her before, so maybe there is some hope here. We shall wait and see. And if not, I mean, at the very least, we are gonna get another pile of entertaining videos of people hate reading her newest release all over again. And to Colleen herself, I'm just gonna say that maybe it is a good idea to listen to what your husband is saying in regards to your books and some of your characters.
I would say my books now are off limits to my husband. He doesn't.
Specifically, why is that?
You know, he's not a big reader to begin with, but he has tried to
read a few of them, and he finds it very hard to separate me from my imagination. And it's so funny. He'll be reading a scene, like there was a scene from Maybe Someday where a girl and a guy were just sitting on a bed writing music together. And he starts complaining to me. He was like, do you think that's okay? He has a girlfriend. Do you think it's okay to sit on a bed with another guy? And I'm like, Heath, that is not me. That's my character in a book that I wrote. My morals are not the same as my character's morals. So he was like, you know, like looking too far into it, thinking that the decisions my characters made were things that I would decide to do. And so I have cut him off from reading my books.
And he might have a point there. Just saying. Anyways, that's it. Now that I filmed this one, I feel like I can get a degree in Colleen Hoover. Let me know how you feel about her. Have you read any of her books? And what did you think about them? And in general, what do you think about this, you know, trend of bashing Colleen Hoover? And if you enjoyed this video, consider giving it a thumbs up and subscribing to the channel to never miss an upload from me. And that's it from my side. Stay safe, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye bye.